Yes, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this presentation on post-pandemic travel protocols. It's brought to you by two high-level experts, Stacey Porter and Michelle Dawkins, and it's made possible through the sponsorship of Georgia Power. We thank them for their generous support of our Community Affairs Committee. I'm Dr. Yolanda White. I'm a pediatrician and I specialize in environmental health. So I care for the medical needs of children and I also protect people from pollution through telehealth consultations and also on a public health level, making sure that our laws and policies are strong and enforced. Well, today's talk, Leading Through Change, Post-Pandemic Travel Protocols, couldn't be more timely. Our speakers will be presenting together. First, I'd like to introduce you to Stacey D. Porter. He's a high-level security professional leader with more than 20 years of Department of Homeland Security experience, where he managed security personnel in the aviation and security industry. Mr. Porter held a top secret security clearance for over 20 years while employed with the federal government. He has experience working with public and private sector organizations at the local, state, national, and international levels. He has a broad background in vulnerability assessment and mitigation, security planning, threat and risk assessment, and investigative management operations. Mr. Porter also has managed and oversaw access into the White House complex and Vice President's complex, as well as local and out-of-town details. He's maintained liaison with other federal, state, and law enforcement agencies, as well as the airline industry, and participated in leadership-focused emergency preparedness drills. He's examined intrusion detection, duress alarm, closed-circuit television, and access control systems for adequate coverage, and ensured measures were in place to protect assets. He's provided physical protection to the highest level elected leaders visiting foreign dignitaries, facilities, and major events. He sounds very accomplished, and many of you may recognize him from being featured in a recent Man Crush Monday email. Our next speaker is Michelle Dawkins. She's another subject matter expert. She's a certified trainer for over 25 years. She has spent the last 15 years specializing in occupational safety and health, both as a trainer and a consultant. She has a passion for worker education and heads our Education and Workforce Development Committee. Some of you may recall her previous talks because she is very passionate. Her expertise covers several areas, including construction, chemical companies, environmental remediation, manufacturing, Department of Transportation, shipping and handling of hazardous materials, risk management in automotive and related industries. Her trainings include disaster preparedness, workplace, health and safety, consumer safety awareness, and to top it off, she's a microbiologist. So she knows a lot about microorganisms, and that includes these viruses. I also want to acknowledge the co-chair of Community Affairs, the lovely Gwen McDaniel, who's been working very hard with our committee, and also our other co-chair, Dr. Calvin Ellison. We greatly appreciate their leadership. So starting with Stacey Porter, are there any other interesting facts you'd like to share with the group about yourself?
Thank you, Dr. White. I appreciate that intro. I'll talk to you guys a little bit, which you saw my bio briefly up on the screen. I'll go back when I started my career with the Secret Service back in '95. I worked for former President Bill Clinton and also former President George Bush. During that time at the White House, all spent at the White House, I had a plethora of experience where I had opportunity to meet and travel and do so many things while working with the Secret Service. Unfortunately, the one day that I was working at the White House during 9/11, we all know what occurred at that time. We had a terrorist attack on our homeland. And after that, former President George Bush, he created the Department of Homeland Security. So after that, I decided, what can I do to ensure we never have a terrorist attack on our homeland? So I transferred over to the Department of Homeland Security. And during that time, that's when I started doing risk assessments on our airports. So if you've traveled throughout the United States to an airport, I probably did the risk assessment on that airport. Also did several risk assessments internationally as well. So again, my passion is risk assessments. I did a lot of travel doing that, and I learned a great deal from the federal government in doing that. Moving forward, how I ended up in Atlanta, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I got a promotion here to Atlanta as a supervisor. And I was a supervisor with the Federal Air Marshal Service. And during that time, did that for about 10 years. And in 2018, I retired from the federal government. And I did a short stint over at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport as a security manager. I did that for maybe 8 months, I believe. But in doing that, again, learned a great deal within those 8 months at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. However, that wasn't something that I envisioned doing when I retired from the federal government. So I started my own business, Porter Global Security. And with that, I do risk assessments on schools, houses of worship, or any business that you may operate. So again, I think it's very important that businesses conduct risk assessments. So, anytime you're going to add to your facility or you have new employees coming in, employees leaving out, I think it's important to know what mitigations or vulnerabilities that you can mitigate. And that's where I come into play. Now, interesting fact I'd like to share with you guys. This was back in, I can't remember the year, so I won't talk about the year, but I remember at the White House, I was at the Christmas party. And during that time, my son was 2 years old, and a typical 2-year-old boy, he was running around the White House having a good time. However, it was time for me to do the photo op with the first family, and we were in the blue room. And this was the one time that I had to grab my son. He was starting to scream and kick and holler because he wanted to have fun and run around the White House. However, I wanted to get my picture taken with the first family. And anytime that you have a picture taken with the first family, they always place the male on the first lady's side and they place the female on the president's side. So right when I got next to former First Lady Laura Bush, my son started flailing his legs, and he almost kicked Ms. Bush in the face because he didn't want to stand and take his picture. He wanted to run around and have fun. However, when I got the photo from the photographer, it actually came out great. It looked like he was jumping in the air, like he was having fun, but that would have been a sad moment for me if he had kicked the First Lady in the face because he wanted to get down and run around the White House. So that's an interesting fact for me. And Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Stacey, and thank you all for joining us. My background, as recorded in my bio, is that I have been doing a great deal of training, and I really, really enjoy training. But I did start my career as a microbiologist. My hometown is in Massachusetts, Springfield, Massachusetts, home of the Basketball Hall of Fame. But I started off in the health department as a microbiologist, testing all of our area restaurants, our nursing homes, any place that prepared food. So I had a bird's eye view of what goes on. So for a long time, I did not eat out. And I can remember one conversation in the back seat with my 2 young daughters at the time. And they were saying that I told them we were going out, we were going to have dinner. And I can remember them sitting behind me saying, I don't know, let's not get excited because, she's going to see something and we're not going to stay. So I realized what type of an effect what I was doing was having on my daughters. But I would see things that the average person would not see. Most people go in and they see the score. But because I worked in the laboratory, I saw the growth. I saw what's under the microscope. And so, as a microbiologist, those are just some of the things that continue to stick with me, whether I'm checking into a hotel, whether I'm utilizing, no matter what it is, those eyes are with me. And so I started my career here after the blizzard of '93 chased me clean out of New England. I came to Atlanta and started working at some of the universities, DeKalb Tech, Atlanta Tech, and landed at Clark Atlanta, where I worked in the Environmental Justice Resource Center. And that's where I believe my career started to bloom, because that's where I really developed my passion for working with people as far as education and workforce development, education and training, I should say, is concerned. I have been instrumental in helping individuals to clean up every major disaster since 9/11. We've cleaned up we were participants in the cleanup for Katrina. We did the Gulf Coast, the BP oil spill. We did some others that Aiken, South Carolina, train derailment. So some of the students that I've trained have participated in all of those actual national catastrophes that have happened. And I still keep in touch with many of them. And this not only provided them with skills, but it changed their lives to be able to go into other communities and to really help, especially when we were doing the Katrina cleanup as well as the BP oil spill. So I just look forward to sharing more information as we go through this training. Thank you. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead with our training.
Okay, just to go over some virtual training logistics, guys, just know that this is going to be recorded. Your microphone and your video will be disabled throughout the presentation. Please use the chat and enter your questions. We'll make sure that we will address your questions. We'll try to do it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and start out with the slide. As you see up here, industry guidance for promoting the safety, and I apologize, let me adjust the pictures that I see so I can read the entire screen. Let's see here, let me minimize. Okay, industry guidance for promoting the health and safety of all travelers. Let's talk about this for a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, I've done a ton of risk assessments on our airports. And some of the things that I look at, especially number one, creating transmission barriers. Some of the things I would do with that, especially when dealing with businesses, these practices would include things like reinforcing hand hygiene. And that's very important, especially now that we have to deal with this pandemic. And that can decrease the risk of transmission of respiratory viruses by 50%. You also want to utilize PPEs, protective equipment. We want to talk about masks and gloves. I know gloves, that's a hot topic, and there's a lot of cross-contaminations when you talk about utilization of gloves. But again, that's a part of the process that I would look at in doing a risk assessment, especially when you see so many people traversing through the airport or working at the airport and you have to come in contact with them. So it's very important that they're utilizing the proper PPEs. Also installing physical barriers. We see a lot of this at the grocery stores, at the convenience stores as well, with the barriers of the plastic shields. You're also going to see that, or you may see that, hopefully you will, at your airports when you go to the ticket counters. Do they have the plastic shields? Or will you go to your gate area to talk with the gate agent? Will it be wide open, or will they have the plastic shields to have that barrier in between you and the customer? Also, you want to encourage physical distancing. And that can be done by placing signage along the floors. Also, you want to, have the verbal commands as you walk through the airport, just like you hear, the commands coming from the loudspeaker. So those are some of the things that I would recommend if I'm conducting a risk assessment on an airport, if they don't already have that in place. But it's important for us to, as human beings, that we encourage the physical distancing. You want to discourage congregating in large crowds. At one time when we were aboard the aircraft going down the jet bridge, it was always crowded in that jet bridge. And that was definitely a concern. It would be a concern now. So I think a lot of the airline industries, they've done a great job with that. They may board a limited amount of people now, so you're not crowded in the jet bridges. I think personally that, you stand a chance of possibly contracting the virus in environments like that around the gate area. And I think you're probably safer on the aircraft because of how the air is circulated. And we'll go and talk about that a little bit. Enhancing sanitation, number two. Again, you want to promote the health and safety of our customers as well as the employees, since they're the ones that have to go into the airport every day. And that can be done by establishing policy and implementing more frequent hand washing, as I mentioned. For some reason, if you can't get to soap and water, hand sanitizer is very important. And you want to use the sanitizer with 6% or more alcohol. I'm not sure if you guys read last week or 2 weeks ago, they had sanitizer that was shipped over here. I want to say Costco, and I can't remember the other retail stores that came from Mexico, and it had methadol in it. So again, if you have sanitizer, it's important that you read the back of the ingredients, because you want to be careful with that, because if it has methadol, it will burn the skin. So that's very important, some things that you want to do when enhancing sanitation procedures. Again, sanitizing more frequently, using products and disinfectants that meet requirements to be effective against the COVID-19. But you want to pay close attention to your high-touch services because, again, we've read and listened to many of our scientists where they talk about your high-touch surfaces where the coronavirus virus can stay on that surface for a long period of time. So you want to be mindful of that. Again, if you're traversing through the airport, look around, see if they have hand sanitation stations throughout the airport if you're traveling. If they don't, I would recommend you carrying, the sanitation yourself, and you definitely want to utilize the soap and water at the restrooms. But hopefully, with now airports are slowly reopening and are starting to build more traffic, they have these procedures in place. Promoting health screening. Very important again. This is more so for the employees working at the airport. And this also can go in hand with those of you working in businesses. Promoting health screening procedures that will require, your employees to monitor their health. That's something we should have been doing prior to COVID-19. And you want to not report to work if you're ill or if you're showing any symptoms. And last, self-isolate. You definitely need to do that if you're showing symptoms of COVID-19 or if you're awaiting test results. But if you're definitely diagnosed with COVID-19, it's very important that you self-isolate. So again, some of these things we should have been doing prior to COVID-19. I know a lot of us, we want to get this project done. We have a certain date that is due, and sometimes we'll fight through it and want to go into work. But, in this day and age, if you're feeling ill, you definitely need to reach out to someone and let them know because you don't want to go into work and have someone else, possibly catch what you have. And number 4, follow food and beverages service guidelines. This is very important. While COVID-19, to my knowledge, is not a food-borne illness, and Michelle or Dr. White, you guys can definitely chime in on this one, but to my knowledge, it's not a food-borne illness, and food and beverages services is essential, and it's a part of the hospitality our industry provides for travelers. And some of the things we also want to remember when serving food and beverages, travel businesses should follow the FDA best practices for retail food stores. And also they should review the National Restaurants Association. And that's very important. So again, you see the source just below number 4. And if you want more information on that, again, this webinar is being recorded and you can feel free to go to this website and get more information on that. Michelle, if you can, I'm not sure if folks can read this on the screen right now. If you can enlarge it for me a little bit. Now, looking at this, I wanted to put this on here. This is from the Texas Medical Association. Again, you can go on their website and look at this. But I wanted to highlight this for everybody. Looking at the low risk in green, and if you scroll up all the way down to high risk in red. But it gives you a breakdown of the various things that you can, kind of be aware of. You can scroll back up for me again a little bit. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Just looking at number 1, opening of the mall. And you see that's a low risk. Me personally, I don't go into the mall. I pretty much just order whatever I need. But you can see that's the low risk. The biggest thing right here I wanted to point out, number 2, getting restaurant takeout. I know many of us lately, since we've been quarantined in March, I'm leery about going into a restaurant to sit down and eat, but I have done takeout food orders before, but you also have to be careful of that. It all depends on what restaurant you're going to. I did a couple of weeks ago, I went to a Jamaican restaurant, and no fault to the young lady, she probably wasn't properly trained. However, she had on gloves, and as she was fixing my food, which was fine, she did it with gloves, but she also had the gloves on, touching the cash register. Then she wanted to use my debit card to pay for it. And she also wanted to give me napkins and utensils. I politely asked her if I can swipe my debit credit card. I also said to her that I didn't need any napkins or utensils. So again, where does the education come in when you're talking about your employees working on the front line? So that's very important. But this is a chart I would definitely recommend taking a look at this, and it will give you a better idea. Should I travel? Should I go to the beach? Should I, do various other things? And it gives you the low risk all the way down to the high risk. If you can scroll to the high risk for me, Michelle. And this is the big one right here. Again, I'm not going to go into that. That's a different topic for another day. But when we talk about our schools, bringing kids, bringing teachers, bringing everybody back into our schools, you know, if we're canceling our convention as far as the Republican convention, if we're canceling that because you don't want all these people under one roof, if we're canceling our house of worship services because you don't want, you know, all these people under one roof, that's also something that we may have to look at as well, schools and possibly colleges as well. So again, I just wanted to highlight some things here on the higher risk, but feel free to take a look at this once the webinar is emailed to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacey. So here, when we talk about protecting travelers or protecting workers, it's the same thing. This right here represents a hierarchy of controls, and this is what we use in the world of safety. This hierarchy was developed back in the 1950s. And so as you can see, at the top level, we look at the most effective ways to keep people safe. And elimination is one of the things. This is where you physically remove the hazard. So what were we doing, or what should we have been doing? We should have been isolating. We should have had as a nation that 14-day period where we were isolated. That's one of the ways that you're eliminating or putting engineering controls in place. So you're isolating these two combinations, I should say the first two levels, the elimination and engineering controls are where you're keeping people away from the hazard. So you're allowing them to stay inside. You're asking them to, to shop by virtual, order their food, things like that, so that you're not having a whole lot of people out in places at the same time. And then when we go down, administrative controls, as we slowly began to open up businesses, we were looking at ways to change the way people work. So what you're doing is you're staggering your staff, you're limiting the number of people that are coming into your facility. Those are what we call administrative controls. And then lastly, you're utilizing the PPE system. What we did incorrectly, I feel, as a nation, is we started at the bottom and not at the top. So when you look at other countries where their numbers have been, kind of stabilized, or they didn't have large numbers, it's because they use this hierarchy system and put that in place as a part of their infectious disease protocol. And we did not do that. We started with the PPEs, and then remember, in the very beginning, it was very questionable. So we went back and forth as to whether or not we should wear masks, whether or not, having the N95. When we found out that there was a shortage, then that's when we shifted to the regular face mask or the surgical mask, so that we lost a lot of time in that process. And so what that did was it allowed this particular virus to start, taking over. And that's what we see now. And so what, in my opinion, would help us now to stabilize our numbers is to go back to this system right here and start all over again. Start a 14-day protocol, shelter in place, or whatever we need to do for many of the businesses that aren't exactly essential, that we're calling essential, shutting those down. And I know that's a very controversial, but one of the things I'd like to say is that this has worked in other countries, and we need to make sure that it works here in our country so that we can now get back on track as to where we need to be. So just some of the basics about COVID-19, because as I have discussions with people, I find out that people don't know the basic information. So some of the basics, of course, are the major symptoms are fever, cough, trouble breathing. Those are some of your telltale signs. But as this thing has progressed, there's been a myriad of different types of symptoms. People are presenting all kinds of things. They're having problems with their internal organs. It's become to the point where some doctors have said they're seeing signs and symptoms in some people that they've not seen in others. So there's a whole lot of things that are going on right now. The average incubation period is roughly about 5 days, and 99% of individuals usually show symptoms within a 12 to 14 days period. And this is why they request the 14-day isolation period. So we also understand that there's some people who are infected with COVID-19 who don't show any kinds of signs or symptoms. They do not necessarily require hospitalization for any kind of respiratory distress. But even those people that don't report being sick may be sick. So when you're out moving around, just because you see somebody that does not show signs and symptoms does not mean that that person does not have them. And so that's why it's important that you utilize the guidelines that have been put forth with the physical distancing, the washing of your hands, and wearing the mask. And you're going to constantly hear me say that, because right now, those are the three things that all of the scientists are recommending, all of our medical personnel are recommending, and we want to stay within those guidelines. Some of the other symptoms, as I said, shortness of breath, coughing, chills, muscle pain, headaches, sore throat, loss of taste or smell. So far, I've had 2 family members, my oldest brother and a sister-in-law, that did test positive. My brother, who works in a laboratory at one of the hospitals at home, said that he said he was experiencing chest pains, and then his muscles. He said he was standing in front of his bed and he could not even take 2 steps to sit on his bed. He had to call his wife to assist him. So different symptoms, different signs for different people. And we want to be cognizant of, what's going on with our bodies. So what are some of the sources of infection? Droplets. Droplets are produced when a person coughs, sneezes, speaks forcefully. Sometimes in gyms when they're exercising, droplets can be formed. Singing, we heard of an entire choir that ended up with individuals being affected or infected. Droplets from an infected person's respiratory tract can travel to the mucosal areas. Those are the moist areas of your body, like your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. And this is why it's recommended that you don't touch your face. People have a habit of touching your face without even thinking about it. But after you wear your mask, if you're donning and doffing, putting it on and taking it off correctly, you're trying to limit your chances of touching those areas, those mucosal areas of your body. Infection from droplets also occur when you're in close contact with people. And this is why we recommend that 6-foot distance, as you can see in the graphic here, making sure that you understand that if only one of you has on a mask, then both of you are still potentially at risk. But when both of you have on a mask, then it's drastically reduced. It does not mean that it's not there, but it does mean that it is drastically reducing the possibility of that you becoming affected or infected. Sources of infection also are from surfaces or objects, persons that are touching any kind of surface, especially when you're traveling, like the handrails, the parts of the airport, airplane, the seats. And as a microbiologist, I already had the habit. I was already carrying all kinds of, wipes and things like that. So that's a part of my natural practice. I just traveled, drove 16 hours to visit my mother. She was turning 80 over the weekend. And I had to really sit down before I got on the road and strategically map out that trip. I initially wanted to rent a RV, but I wasn't able to do that. They were all pretty much booked up, and then some other things. In this climate that we're in, I wasn't able to rent one, but I was able to rent a van. So my daughter and I took turns going into the facilities that we went to. We limited everything that we did. We had wipes, we had spray. We just had to really consciously think about what we were doing. I did not want to stay in a hotel, but when I got to the rest area that evening, I didn't feel comfortable in there. And that's a whole nother conversation in some of the rural areas that we were in, because we were going from Atlanta to New England. So there's a lot of, places in between there. And so we decided to rent a hotel. And so now, as I rent a hotel, or as we rent hotels, we have to think through that process. What does that look like? Well, I already carry my own sheets and spray and pillows. I mean, you almost got to bring everything in, which is what I do. But when I got there, I recognized that they were not really practicing the COVID guidelines that they should have. it was 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't want to argue with anyone, but I'm very aware of certain things just based on what I do for a living. Because like Stacey, I've done some risk assessment. So there's certain things that I look at. And one of the first things was that they didn't even have a front desk person. We had to go to the hotel next door. That was the directive that was given to us when we called the number after checking in online. And so it was a whole lot of stuff. So when you travel, you have to be ready for, first of all, be COVID ready, but then you also have to think of a contingency plan. And so those are some of the things, and I'll talk about that a little later, that I had to deal with on this trip that I just took last week. And so it's not business as usual. It's not travel as usual, because just because entities are saying that they're doing all of these practices does not necessarily mean that they're actually doing them.
And can I add to this, Michelle?
Sure.
Just looking at the first picture up top, again, they have on their masks, which is great, but, look at them leaning on the rails. And when you look at an escalator or you deal with the escalator, especially if you have a family, kids tend to want to have fun on the escalators. One thing is dangerous to allow your kids to play on the escalator. And two, look at how they're touching this. So that's why I said it's important for you to keep some type of hand sanitizer, on your person, or if they have it in and around the airport, that you can utilize that. Because again, you don't know this individual these individuals on the escalator, and they're leaning on it, and you can come right behind and put your hand on it, and then you don't know what you're touching. The picture below, that looks great to the naked eye, but because I used to travel quite a bit, and I still do, once this pandemic slows down, this is great. You look at this aircraft and say, wow, they have great TV screens. However, how many people, have been touching this TV screen? But hopefully now, especially with Delta, Delta just spent $10 million for a company to have their aircraft between each flight. They use what's called a electrostatic disinfectant to clean the aircraft. They also wipe it down. But I ask that if you're going to fly, make sure you wipe down your area as well. Don't be dependent on the airline industry to clean your area. You should also clean your area as well.
Thank you, Stacey.
Great. So thank you all. Now we have some questions. And by the way, if you all have any questions for our speakers, please put it in the chat. But here's some common questions and comments from clients. Planning for life after coronavirus. When will we know it's safe to travel again?
Great question, Dr. White. Again, many avid travelers, they are wondering when will it be safe to travel? Although I can't give you a definitive answer right now, the one thing I will suggest is that you, try to venture out in your own state. We live in Georgia. I'm sure there's a lot to see here. Unless it's absolutely necessary that you travel out, have to fly out of state. Again, make sure you do your due diligence. If I have to travel from Georgia to, say, the West Coast, California, Las Vegas, do your research. When I get to Vegas, well, I have to fill out some form of paperwork. Well, I have to quarantine for a certain amount of time. Or if I'm going to drive, which most of us are doing now. Again, I'm from Washington, D.C. So when I travel home, which I may be doing in the next couple of weeks, I'm probably going to quarantine up there for maybe 14 days with my mother, as opposed to just going up for 3, 4, 5 days and turning around, coming back to Atlanta. So it's very important that we do our due diligence when it comes to traveling. I know a lot of us are wondering, may do work for business, for your business, travel for your business, I'm sorry. And that may entail you traveling out of the country. However, we know when you travel internationally, especially to the European Union, right now, that's a no-go. Or if you want to take a vacation for pleasure, where you want to travel to the Caribbean island. Again, just last week, we had the Bahamas, banned the U.S. from traveling into the Bahamas. And then a few days later, they lifted that ban. But again, you have to look at the stipulations that they put into place. So that's pretty much what I would have to say for question 1.
Okay, great. And you mentioned a travel ban to the Bahamas. How do I find out the latest cancellations and other travel bans?
It's unfortunate. Even while we're doing this presentation, you probably had some changes come in right while we're doing this presentation, because it's continuously changing. The best thing that I can advise for that is to, keep track of all the State Department regulations. You can do that by following the agency on Facebook. or you can follow them on Twitter. But, right after this presentation or during this presentation, you're probably going to check on your phone or turn on the news, and lo and behold, something's changed just like that. So it's very important that we stay on top of that. And if you can't go to the State Department, I'm sure they have other platforms that you can check, and you can do that on a regular basis.
Okay, and to answer Jamila's question, does that include cruises?
The cruises, to my knowledge, they haven't started anything. I think the first cruise that I heard of is over in Germany. I don't know what cruise line that was, but I know Germany did a cruise recently. But again, I'm not familiar with any cruises leaving out of Miami or any other ports in the United States. I know that's something that may be coming up. I want to say September timeframe, but again, I haven't gotten any knowledge on the cruise, and that's a lot of work involved with that. When you talk about being on the vessel of a ship versus being on the vessel of an aircraft. So again, I'm sure they're doing all the due diligence to ensure the safety of everyone, because that's a massive ship and you have so many people in one location. So just definitely continue to check the travel bans and check the various websites, on when cruises will start cruising again.
And not only that, Stacey, when it comes to cruises, one of the things that I realize people don't understand is that when you're on a cruise, the laws are different. You have to abide by maritime laws. And so getting sick and things like that are very, very different when you talk about being on international waters. So people have to understand and look that information up before you start getting back into cruises and things like that. Because if you get sick, as we saw earlier in the year, an individual got sick and they could not afford to pay the cost of the hospitalization, because in some countries you have to pay that cash before you leave out. So we're talking about still being under pandemic constraints. And if you're talking about being on the seas, then understand that the guidelines or the laws that you may recognize in your country or in your state are very different when we talk about following maritime laws on the waters.
Okay, great. And how might flying look different post-pandemic?
Okay, well, let's go back again to 9/11. Prior to 9/11, all of us, we were able to walk to the gate with your loved ones or with your family members and just, sit down and talk with them. But after 9/11, Department of Homeland was created, and they created a TSA. And now we can no longer go through the security checkpoint unless we're flying for pleasure or flying for business. But you have to go through all types of security screening. So again, these are some of the things that we have to look out for. I haven't heard this, but it's a possibility, with our numbers continuously going up and fluctuating, it's a possibility that, if you take a look at your passport, they may add some type of, seal or something on that passport. Again, I don't know what that may entail, but anytime that I travel, I always keep a copy of my passport in my bag in the event that I lose my passport. So that's something that you want to be mindful of. But, again, could there be a new public health agency that requires a new passport to travel? I don't know. That's hard for me to answer that, but that's some of the things that we have to be mindful of. It's hard to really configure an airport because it's already there in place. But after 9/11, they figured out a way, how can we implement TSA within and around our airports? So that's something that they're looking at doing as well. And I'm sure you're seeing that now. Because of this pandemic, you're seeing, various things done to airports just to practice the safety and security of the passengers or the travelers.
And not to mention the risk that some of the TSA agents are facing right now as well. We keep hearing that their numbers of infected personnel has been increasing as well. But think about it, they're coming into contact with many, many people. And unfortunately, they're still wearing just regular face masks. I really believe that when we have frontline workers like that who are having to come in contact with so many different people from all over the place, that they should actually be just like our hospital personnel, and they should be required to wear N95s as well.
Okay, great. And what other comments can you share with us regarding permanent changes in in-flight social distancing?
Just to touch on that again, things change all the time. We went from American Airlines, United Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Delta Airlines, all the big ones. We went from them blocking the middle seat on an aircraft because, again, they were trying to entice people to get back out there and fly again. So, the practice social distancing on the aircraft, they wanted to block the middle seat. But we know, this is the world we live in. It's all about money. And American Airlines, United Airlines, and also Southwest, they quickly, abandoned that. I will speak that Delta Airlines, they still block the middle seat and they only fly the aircraft at 70% capacity. But they're doing that up until September just to see how things are going to work out. So just keep that in mind when you start to travel. Also, if you feel uncomfortable and you're scheduled to take a flight and you get to the airport and you're not comfortable because you're looking around and you're seeing, so many people ready to board this flight, hopefully, which is also a requirement for a lot of the airlines now, that you're required to wear a mask if you're going to fly on that aircraft. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, you probably can talk with the gate agent and they can move you to a different flight. I know that's easier said than done, especially if you're traveling for business. You need to be at this location at a certain time. And the last thing you want to do is get off a scheduled flight and get rebooked for a different flight, which is going to mess up your time getting to your location. But that's something that airline industries are working with people if they're feeling uncomfortable. So right now, Delta is the only one that's still doing the blocking of the middle seat.
Okay, great. And there's also been a lot of discussion in the chat about the one of the symptoms being lack of smell or unusual smell, like smelling a hand, like smelling a cup of, like a taste, even unusual taste, like tasting a cup of coffee, like it was
Michelle,
salty.
did you want to handle that one?
Yeah, those are some of the symptoms that many of the individuals say that they suffer from, and they are still doing a whole lot of research around that. But that is one of the telltale signs right now, that if you have lost your sense of taste, or things taste other than what they normally should taste or smell like, then that may be something that you want to take a look and get tested, because that may be one of the indicators that you are possibly positive for COVID-19.
Yeah, and also I want to add that for anyone who has not been tested yet and you're interested in getting tested, there is free testing available through the Fulton County Health Department. It's offered every day except on Sundays, and you can get on their website for more information. But the daily clinic is in Alpharetta, but they also have local testing sites vary day by day. So when you get on their website, you can find out more information on that. And I can tell you from my experience, when I had it done, I did the testing myself. They gave me, they just took all my demographic information, and I did the swab in my nose, and I put it inside the tube, and I broke it off and put it in the bag and handed it to them. They really don't touch you at all.
Okay.
And I got someone called and left a message on my voicemail 1 week later with the test results, but we ended up playing phone tag for about another week. So it took me 2 weeks to actually get my results. I don't know if anyone else has any other experience with that. But there's another question, another topic in the chat about hand sanitizers. I'm so sorry, Andrea, to hear that you had a bad experience with a chemical burn from the hand sanitizers, and some are being recalled by the FDA. Do you guys have any information on that?
Yes, as Stacey said earlier, many of the sanitizers that are out there are really not good. So you want to, if you can, I really encourage people, if you have access to soap and water, that should be your primary way of disinfecting your hands. And we have a slide that's coming up that's going to address that. But there are some sanitizers that are actually very toxic, and those are the ones that they're hopefully pulling off of the shelves. But we want to be very, very aware that all alcohol is not good alcohol. And so there is one that's wood alcohol that is very extremely toxic. So you want to be very, very careful. Even for those who are teachers and you're bringing sanitizers into your classrooms, understand that, children, their hands, their skin is very sensitive, or you have other individuals that are very sensitive to alcohol. Alcohol has drying it'll dry out your hands, dry out your skin. It'll remove the natural oils, and then that will actually allow infection, you know, because now your skin is broken down, and if it cracks, then something can get inside, whether you're cleaning and things like that. So you really want to be very, very aware of the type of sanitizer that you're purchasing. And we do talk about that shortly in one of the slides.
Okay, great. And thank you, Dr. Alexander, for telling us about how some of these hand sanitizers are adulterated with methanol instead
Right.
of alcohol.
Exactly.
And just so you know, ethyl alcohol is the same as ethanol. And so what about the appropriate level of alcohol to look out for, the percentage range? You guys want to talk about that?
Usually roughly around 60 to 70% alcohol is what they're saying can help with the SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that actually causes the COVID-19. So you want to be very, very careful, because people are, like I said, people are really getting all kinds of things, and then they're mixing them up. And, you know, we don't want to pretend to be little chemists. We want to make sure that what we're utilizing is both good for our hands, but also the other parts of our body as well, because we don't want to cause any kind of systemic changes in our body. And those are things that I know Dr. Alexander, as well as yourself, can address when it comes time for you know, coming into contact with products that actually don't just affect you on your skin epidermically, but also they can come into get into your bloodstream and then really wreak havoc in your body. So you really want to be cautious about that. So once again, I stress that if you can, and this is one of the things that I do, I have 2 bottles in my back seat, in my back area of my car. I have a pump that has the hand soap, and I have 1 pump that has water. And I wash my hands. I wash my hands for the 20 seconds outside of my car, and then I, you know, rinse them off. And then I also have my paper towels. So I have a wash station right in my car. That's just one of the practices that I do. And, you know, you may come up with your own decon system, but that's the one that I utilize myself. I don't like a lot of the different sanitizers anyway.
Okay, so is that what you would recommend to Tanya, who asked what cleaning protocol or process should I implement when renting a car?
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute. If we can continue with the slides, and we'll try to address most of those questions toward the end. Okay. So this is another source of infection. These are fine fluids. Once again, a person can become infected by the virus traveling in fine fluids. Those are in an aerosolized state. That means that they're airborne. And when we talk about the virus being airborne, right now science is saying that they can remain, this particular virus or the particles from this virus can remain in the air for roughly 3 to 4 hours. That's a long time. So if you're entering into places, any kind of closed environment like elevators and things like that, that's where you may have some problems. Any kind of closed, any kind of small environments, and if this virus is able to stay in an aerosolized state, then you are subjecting yourself to that. One of the things when I was in the hotel, I did have to do a training even before I went on my my trip to New England. I had to do a training out in Savannah, and my daughter went with me, and we were in a hotel. We checked before I went. I called, I checked on their protocols. I wanted to know where I was going to be doing the actual training, the meeting room, and it was very well set up. But I noticed things because there's certain things that I look for even before pre-COVID. There were things that I look for because I kind of do my own risk assessment when I enter into places like that. But they did have sanitizer as soon as you walked in at the front desk. But like Stacey said, they still wanted to take my credit card and slide it, and I wanted to do it myself. I tried to limit that contact. And I'm thinking all the time, now the next thing is the elevator. And I said, no, we're just gonna have to walk up and down the stairs. And I had packages because I had my sheets and my pillow and all of the other stuff that I train with, because normally when I go down, I have a lot of stuff that I have to bring, but we had to utilize. So I got my exercise in. Wasn't able to walk the track like I normally do, but I walked those stairs 3, 4, 5 times out of that day, because I knew that, I did not want to subject myself to those areas, because I did observe people who were not wearing masks, and they should be I didn't see a lot of signage. So those were things that I spoke to them about, because they do, I know Hilton has indicated that they have put together some housekeeping protocols, and they have actually branded them, as have some of the other hotels. Hilton actually has what they call a Hilton's Clean Stay with Lysol initiative. So some of these hotels have their own initiatives, but that doesn't say that you go in and not protect yourself as well, because I wipe down absolutely everything. I actually have a fogger. I just forgot to bring that with me. But I had all of the other supplies, and I wiped down absolutely everything in that room. I sprayed down the beds before I even put my own sheets and stuff over the entire bed. So it depends on how far you want to go, but there's certain things, like I said, that I look for. So while we wear masks, when you look at the first pictures with both individuals, neither one of them have on the mask, you see how great their risk is, and then more protective when that one person has on a mask and the other one doesn't. And initially they were saying that when, for example, you wore a mask and the other one didn't, it wasn't really protecting you. But now I know the Mayo Clinic has done some research, and they're saying that the mask that you wear does protect you. It does limit the amount of contact, or it limits the possibility of the virus getting on you. So it's a protective measure for both parties, is what I'm trying to say. And as you can see on the bottom level with the lower risk, with both individuals having on the mask and then doing the physical distancing, then that is one of the greater ways to protect yourself. And that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that, when you're coming into contact with people, whether you're a business owner, whether, you're traveling or whatever it is, you're shopping, you want both parties to have on masks. Even when I see people I went into the grocery store, I try to limit even that, but I go first thing in the morning, and they had the plastic barrier, but that worker didn't have on any mask. So I asked her whether she felt safe, and then we had a conversation about it, because I really didn't think that she was protected. She had the plastic barrier, but I think she should have also had on a mask, and I recommended that to her. And then these are just some of the other pictures where you can see. And of course, on the bottom where you're staying home, one of the best ways, if you have that ability to stay completely away, then that helps. But we want to mitigate the situation. And the only way we can do it is if all of us collaboratively start exercising these practices. First of all, understanding what they are, why they are, and then we all start doing them. And then that's one of the ways we're going to limit that. And especially, like I said, when you're traveling, because you're coming into contact with people from all over, and you don't know, I know my family was kind of apprehensive, but everything we did while I was in New England, we did outdoors. We did it on my sister's back deck. It was very difficult to, after a 16-hour drive, and not seeing my mom for at least, I haven't seen my mom for a year, because when I got ready to go up there earlier in the year, we had this, we had the pandemic. And so she wanted to hug me. And I said, Mom, you can't. And so each time I saw she and my dad, my mom turned 80. That's why I went to celebrate her 80th birthday. My stepfather is 88. And, we had to keep them over there while we were over here. And that was really difficult, because those are our parents. And she kept saying, oh, I just want to hug you. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to place that risk and then worry for the next 14 days or whatever as to whether or not, my coming there has, created an issue. So, it was great seeing them. I wanted to lay eyes on them. My mom still delivers meals to the elderly because she doesn't believe she's one. So my fear is that she's out there, coming into contact, because she's been doing this now for several years after retiring, and we can't get her to sit down. But it was great for me to see that she's still up, she's out, they both drive, they both get around, and trying to make sure that they're doing the right thing is really one of the reasons why I went down there, because to me, they're out of control. But, they're doing what they know to do, and they're staying safe, and that's what counts. So preparedness, protection, response, recovery. These are some of the mitigation strategies. We continue to focus on the three major, which are the physical distancing, your personal protective measures, and it's personal. Those are your protective measures that you need to take wherever you go, and then cleaning and disinfecting surfaces and objects. You're hoping that the entities that you're going to are doing that. But as I said, I take the necessary precautions and I cover that for myself. I've gone into places even as of late, and I watch, and people don't clean like you think. And so in answer to the young lady's question about the rental car, I did rent a van, but one of my processes has always been, this is pre-COVID already. I mean, again, I always disinfect that vehicle. I mean, if I could have a Petri dish as I wipe down just the steering wheel and showed you what grew under that microscope. And I taught my daughters this long time ago, that when you get in there, I wear gloves just to get in, and then I wipe down that thing, but I'm not wearing those gloves all along, because eventually if I touch something else after that, I'm gonna possibly contaminate. So I get in, I sanitize that car really, really good. I have some products that I'm using that are EPA registered. We're going to talk about that in a second. They're EPA registered to kill the coronavirus. So I did my own cleaning, disinfecting process, cleaning and disinfecting process. And then I, took the car and did what I had to do as far as travel. But when I got back to turn it in, I was able to observe what they were doing in terms of cleaning out those vehicles. And in my opinion, it was business as usual. They weren't doing anything. I watched. The only thing I did not know was exactly what chemical or product they were using, but they were not allowing it to sit for a certain amount of time because they were trying to get those vehicles out. There were lots of people that were renting the cars. And I was saying, my God, once again, we put our lives in the care of other people, and we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what type of products, if the products are able to kill the coronavirus, or are they just a cleaner? We don't know those things. And so this is why we have to gain this knowledge so that when we go out, we can do the right things to protect ourselves and our family.
Can I add to that, Michelle?
Sure.
Just, I know we were talking about rental cars, but we also have to consider our personal own vehicle as well. Many of us, now all of us, we have to take our vehicles in for service. So when they take your vehicle, they're going to the back bay to, do the service, the oil change. So you also want to, ask the question, do you guys do any type of disinfectant of my vehicle since you have other people driving it? I know I recently had my vehicle serviced, and, I watched the guys before he even got into my car. He put all kinds of measures over my seat, my steering wheel. He put it on the floor mats and everything. So, don't just focus on the rental car as well. Try to make sure they're caring for your vehicle when you take that in for service. And I saw earlier someone was asking a question about their disinfecting their debit or credit card. Just be mindful. We're human, and we're going to do things. I still touch doors when I go gas up. If I forget to grab a little plastic bag or napkin to grab the handle, I may touch it with my hand. The most important thing we have to remember to do is continue to disinfect. Like Michelle mentioned, she keeps soap in her car. I keep sanitizer. I'm sorry, I keep sanitizer in my car. So the minute I get back in my vehicle before I even start it, I'm cleaning my hands. So we're going to touch surfaces. You may have to pass your card over to someone to swipe it. Just, as long as.
Uh-oh, what happened? Stacey?
Yes.
Okay, you went off for a minute.
I did. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stacey. So that 6 foot distance is very important. And once again, sometimes people have a question as to what exactly is 6 feet apart. So just imagine 2 large dogs standing nose to tail. And that's one of the measures that you can utilize. Cover your cough. I'm seeing people, once again, that are not necessarily utilizing the proper cough techniques or etiquette, and that's really, really important. Washing your hands and avoiding touching your nose and your face. Let's take a look at this video so that we can get a picture of what, when we talk about the virus and versus a germ, because a lot of times people are confused, but unlike a germ, a virus needs a host to live and has a weak membrane. The coronavirus membrane can be broken down with just simple soap and water. Is going to play. Uh-oh. Always technical difficulties, huh? Unfortunately, this is not going to play, but this is a very good video. And We checked it, Stacey. So anyway, but this one just shows you that when you're washing your hands, it's very, very important that you utilize the 20 seconds. You need that 20 seconds. The soap cannot break down this virus if you wash your hands only for 5 seconds or for 10 seconds. It has to be a full 20 seconds. And what they did in this video, I'm so sorry we can't show it to you. It was embedded. I don't know what happened. But when they used a lotion that mimicked a virus, that mimicked having a virus on your hands, and it glowed in the dark. So when you saw them washing their hands after 5 seconds and after 10 seconds, you still see what you see there. But after the 20 seconds, it totally annihilates this particular virus. So you don't want to just wash your hands. You want to take the time to actually wash your hands for that full 20 seconds. And so science has backed this up when we talk about washing your hands. Decontamination of surfaces, disinfecting and cleaning. So when we talk about that, once again, whether it's a hotel or something like that, EPA has a list of products that are known to kill the SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. So their list is, if you just Google list N as in Nancy, it has a list of products. Many of them you may have in your home, because not all of the products that we see can actually kill the coronavirus. And by all means, don't just rely on bleach. Bleach has some effects that can, especially if you're using them in facilities where other people are, it can be overwhelming. It can cause someone to have occupational asthma. Everybody relies on that bleach, and most of the time people don't dilute it and they don't use it correctly. But the list N has a list of products that you can utilize that are known to kill the SARS-CoV-2. And so you want to utilize that. And in addition to the disinfecting and cleaning, because you want to be able to do both, you want to make sure that you use what they call contact time. And so contact time means that you're allowing that product to stay wet on a hard surface for the designated amount of time that that manufacturer has prescribed. So what I mean by that, if I were to spray a desk area and I'm using this product from that EPA list, I'm not going to just spray it and then wipe it off. It may need to remain, according to the manufacturer, it needs to remain wet for 5 minutes in order to effectively kill the virus. So I'm going to allow it to stay wet for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and proceed and wipe it off. Because if I start wiping before then, and I only had the virus right here, I'm wiping, I may now be spreading it across that entire surface. So you want to recognize that there is what we call a contact or kill time for the products that you utilize. You want it to remain wet until that designated time, and then you proceed with cleaning. And once again, that is EPA list N as in Nancy.
And can I add to this slide as well?
Certainly.
I mentioned earlier the electrostatic disinfectant, and you see the first picture on the left, the gentleman cleaning, looks like he has Lysol in his hand. Again, that's great that he's doing that, and you want to do the same thing when you have your seated area. But again, this electrostatic disinfectant that they're using on the aircraft, that's like a fogger, and it pretty much, when they use that, it pretty much wraps the entire seat area where it's getting under the surface as well. So, you know, hopefully you shouldn't worry too much about, you know, your seat area on the aircraft if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm pretty sure Delta is doing that since they spent the $10 million to have this done. So just be mindful of that. You know, and they're not just wiping the top surface. That electrostatic disinfectant is also wrapping underneath the seat area as well. And the second picture, the young lady cleaning inside the hotel room. You know, this is great, and we're focusing more on the safety measures, but me with the security background, you know, you don't want to forget your security measures as well. And a lot of times when I go into the hotel, when I check in and I go into my room, I'm ensuring that door is shutting right behind me when I go into my room, because a lot of times those doors have a slow close, and you don't want to go into your room and then someone come in right behind you and lock the door, and all of a sudden you're accosted by individuals. So just be mindful of that. You know, don't forget your security measures as well, even though we're focusing more on the safety measures.
And in addition to that, you know, that's kind of funny, Stacey, that, you know, because you and I both do risk assessments, and I travel a lot just like you know, for trainings. But I was in Memphis several months ago, doing a training, and we had a storm to come through. So that's a whole nother ball game as we enter into storm season. What is that going to look like in the midst of COVID-19? But while I was there, there was a storm, the tornado hit, and it was like not even a half a mile away from our hotel. We didn't have any power. I had gentlemen that were coming from, I was on the cusp of Arkansas. So the guys I was training were coming from a company out of Arkansas and the Memphis area, and I didn't have any power. We didn't have any power in the hotel. I was training downstairs in their meeting room. I actually, normally when I drive, I carry my I carry my lanterns as a source of, emergency power or emergency lighting. And because I flew and I had so much stuff already, because I have to carry hazmat suits and all of that stuff with me, I did not have those lanterns with me. So I had to rely on just the lighting from outside. So I had to pull the curtains back and, all of that. And the hotel manager told me he was going to get some, I thought he was getting more lamps for me or flashlights, but he actually came back with candles. And I immediately scolded him and told him that, first of all, you don't want to give somebody a hazardous material, a hazard like that, because I don't know if, there's no power. How do I know whether or not the gas is off? So I'm thinking way over there. And then it wasn't even the right type of a candle. It was one that you would hold for a vigil or something, because it was not illuminating any light. So I used that as a teachable moment for the students that I was working with, So we don't know when we go into hotels, in addition to the stuff like the cleaning. But right now, routinely, hotels should definitely be training their housekeeping staff on how to use disinfectant safely and correctly. We see that this young lady does have on gloves. She has on a mask. But they should also routinely be cleaning and disinfecting surfaces, any of the public areas, the guest rooms, the television remotes, the toilet handles, door handles, water faucet handles, ice machines when you're utilizing those, the flooring. All of this is something that hopefully they were already doing, but they're doing it more so now as a result of COVID. And they have to remind their staff not to touch their face and practice social distancing and things like that, because there were in one of the hotels, which one was it? Well, the first one, like I said, didn't even have a person. We had to go get, so it was the one in Savannah. I saw them kind of gathering behind the front desk, and that was a big no-no. And then they have to also educate their staff on some of the symptoms to look for, because they're coming into contact once again with lots of people. And then we have to understand that as we approach storm season, hotels are being used for a lot of non-traditional purposes right now. They're using them to house essential workers in some instances. They're using them to quarantine individuals. They're using them when the National Guard was called out. They're placing them in hotels. So does that increase the risk for us if we're sharing that same hotel? So you want to know all of that kind of information before you even check into a hotel. What's going on? Are they utilizing these for non-traditional purposes? And then from what I understand, as storm season proceeds and we can no longer use shelters, because remember, you have large volumes of people who are normally in shelters, they will once again be looking for hotels to house those individuals or to house families. So there's going to be a lot of new areas when we talk about hotels, and not to forget about Airbnbs. If you're utilizing them, what type of safety protocols are those individuals using? Because they did set forth some protocols that Airbnb individuals need to have in place. And that includes, after people check out of an Airbnb, they're supposed to have a period where they don't have anyone move in for 3 days. That 3 days allows, if there were any virus in that environment, for that to kind of settle or, air out, and then that next individual, but they should be doing cleaning in between there. So this has really changed the way we're operating. This is our new norm. So before you check in to even an Airbnb, you want to ask, and hotels are supposed to do that too. They're not supposed to rent out rooms back to back, they're supposed to allow a certain amount of time in between before they put someone else in that room, even after cleaning and disinfecting. So you really want to know what these safety protocols are. There's so much now when it comes time for travel, and we just want to be aware and knowledgeable of what those things are. Stacey?
All right. And so here's some other questions. Can social distancing exist with passengers traveling through security at airports?
I'll go ahead and get that one. You know, when they first started opening up the airports again, you know, I would say it was easily for them to do some type of social distancing. Now that the travel industry is starting to pick up just a little bit, but it's picking up more so than it was back in March. But as we start to see our numbers climb again, they may go back down. However, you know, again, that's what I talked about earlier. Signage is important, you know, and it's also important for us to police ourselves, meaning, you know, as humans, we have to practice the social distancing. Michelle mentioned it earlier, TSA, they will no longer take your boarding pass. They're trying to do as much touchless as they can. So if you're in the acute area of the security checkpoint, you should see signage at the airport. Again, you know, things today don't look like they did last year, which was highly impossible to do any type of social distancing. Personally, again, as I mentioned before, when you get to the gate area and you're seated around that area, you're more likely going to be congregated in a crowded area versus when you get on that aircraft. So again, it all depends on the configuration of the airport. And it also depends on, you know, how crowded the airport is. Again, you know, it's hard to tell people, okay, don't travel on this day. People are going to travel when they want to travel, and hopefully the airports are doing their due diligence and placing signage and placing the over the loudspeaker announcements on social distancing.
All right. And what about airports? Can they adapt makeshift airport security layouts for this new COVID-19 world that we're entering?
They can, and they are. It may not be to the individual's liking, but again, we saw how they had to adapt to the makeshift with the TSA personnel after 9/11. So here we are again with another incident. Well, this is, you know, definitely a major incident with the pandemic going on. So they have to do whatever they can to ensure the safety of individuals. So they are putting procedures in place for passengers traveling through the airport. So again, you know, I hate to keep harping on it, but that's for any business. You know, just like when you go into a grocery store, before you even walk into that store, they may have signage on the door say no weapons allowed, or you must have a shirt before you come into the store. That's the same thing with the airports. You know, just ensure you have all your proper equipment with you, and you can't hold anyone else accountable. You know, just do your part. If you know you're going to be traveling, you know, pack a sanitizer kit, and you know, you can have your mask in there, possibly gloves if that's what you want to put in there, you know, sanitizer if you can find that. I know someone mentioned earlier that, which all of us are going through this, it's almost impossible to find Lysol anywhere, but if you have some, you know, that may be part of your emergency kit. Keeping chargers, things like that. So I think, you know, you can have some sort of makeshift security layout for this COVID-19 world. And the next time you travel, you know, do your mini risk assessment yourselves, you know, see what they have in place. You know, as I go every 20 feet, so to speak, do I see sanitation stations, things like that. So you can, you know, kind of look for those things as well. And if you don't see that, you know, maybe, again, that goes back to you, making sure you have all your proper equipment with you.
Okay, great. In fact, you answered one of the questions in the chat about creating your own personal sanitizing kit. And what about the personal wash station? Is there anything else you would add in addition to that?
As far as the personal wash stations, again, you know, that's hard for me to really answer. I can't, you know, come into your facility as a risk assessor. I'm looking at what you already have in place, because I don't want to come to you and say, okay, it's going to cost you $500,000. Do this right now. Let's look at what you already have in place, and let's utilize what you already have in place. There may be some things that you have to add to that, but the best thing I can tell you as far as the personal, you know, hygiene stations, if you will, is the sanitation stations, which a lot of airports are doing that to help out with the traveling customers, and also just utilizing the restrooms and washing your hands.
And those are some of the guidelines that many of the states have in place for restaurants and other facilities as well. So, you know, and when that person asked that question, I was thinking personal, like your own, you know, in your vehicle, or, you know, whatever area you have. If it's a small business, then you can be very creative with that. You know, there are things that you can utilize. You can, you know, look up some DIYs and come up with ways to create your own wash stations. And like I said, I prefer those over the sanitizers anyway, because I'm really a stickler when it comes to children in particular, and a lot, because kids are getting ready to go back to school. And that's going to be one of the things that teachers have to look at. You know, what can you do in terms of making a makeshift a wash station for your kids, rather than having them, because kids have been known to, you know, lick their hands and all kinds of things like that. And you don't want to be caught in between, you know, a child getting sick as a result of coming into contact with something that had maybe too much alcohol, or them having an adverse effect from the alcohol or from the sanitizers because it smells like apples or something like that, that we decided would be a little more kid friendly. So you know, you just got to look at some of the other creative ways that you can take care or safeguard those that you're responsible for.
Yeah, that's a good point. I recall reading a case report about a child who presented to the ER with acute alcohol poisoning from licking the hand sanitizer that contained ethanol inside of it.
Right.
So thank you for stressing that. And since we're on the same topic, can you answer one of the questions from the chat from Carmen Lita about portable UV disinfectant wands? Like, just how effective are they?
What's it called? Disinfectant wands?
Yes, a portable UV disinfectant wand.
Do you know much about that, Michelle?
I've seen them, and, you know, because once again, they have so many different items like that on the market. My thing is, because I was going to look into one of those myself, but you have to have a mechanism for testing it. And so unless you have that mechanism, which, you know, you may be able to do it with the black light, but unless you have that mechanism in place, and, you know, is that going to mean that the count is lower or that there's none? You know, what is your measuring tool? And when I started thinking of all of the questions that go along with me purchasing one of those, I decided not to. I'm not in a lab anymore. I don't have access to a lot of that stuff. So I decided against it. And now that doesn't mean that it's not effective. It just means that, you know, you have to have some other protocols in place to be able to utilize those and get an effective measurement as to whether or not it works.
And one of the things you have to be mindful of, and I get this a lot, I have a lot of different companies reaching out to me, you know, with all their great technology products, and say, hey, you know, if anybody's interested in this, have them give me a call. A couple of things. You want to make sure this technology that's out here is FDA approved, because a lot of businesses, they will not, you know, implement that in their facilities if it's not approved. Two, you know, we're going to get through this eventually. We know, just like anything else, you know, we're going to have to go through, you know, some trials and tribulations, but eventually we're going to get through this. So if I come to you and I'm telling your business or asking your business, maybe you need to invest in this technology, and 5 or 6 months down the road, you realize, you know, I spent all of this money on this type of technology and I don't use it like I should. So when I start talking technology with businesses, I'm looking at, you know, more bang for your buck. You know, even though it may do a temperature check, but it also may do access control. It may also do some type of biometric screening. So, you know, it's doing all types of different things. So in the event that you no longer have to do any temperature checks, you can still utilize that technology. So just be mindful of that when you start looking at various technologies.
And also that you also have to keep paperwork. You have to have documentation. And so this is where we come with OSHA compliance and things like that. We want to make sure that if you're going to start, you know, utilizing the screening process and all of that stuff, and what happens if you get somebody who tests positive, how are you documenting? Most of that is recordable. It's not necessarily reportable. So knowing what you should be doing, how you should be doing, first of all, you need to have a written protocol. Then you have to keep necessary records, because remember, if they have to come back and do contact tracing, they're going to be looking for documentation. And so your documentation has to be crossing those T's, dotting your I's, and then having a system. If it has to do with, of course, their health, then are you following HIPAA guidelines? So there's a whole lot of other stuff that plays a part in some of the things that you would be doing, especially as you introduce new technology. Where's the paperwork on it? What kind of vetting process did you go through? All of that stuff. So you want to be very, very cautious as you proceed in trying to do the next best thing, because you want to make sure you have a paper trail to follow.
Okay, great. And on the same topic of UV ultraviolet disinfectant, I know there's a new technology that's called far UVC light, ultraviolet C. There's A, B, and C. It's at a different frequency. And apparently that frequency is the far UVC light. It's at a frequency that's safe enough to not harm biological tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys can look into that. And also, and back to your question, should TSA screeners be responsible for conducting passenger temperature checks?
This has definitely been a hot topic. I know the CEO of Southwest Airlines, he wants to have TSA do the health screening. A couple of things, and Dr. White, I'm sure you can attest to this. When it comes to the type of screening for us, the course temperature checks versus a surface temperature check, you have to consider the surface check. If I'm going on a trip and I have to park my vehicle, a few miles from the airport and possibly jump on a shuttle bus to go into the airport, now you're looking at all that energy you just spent, and now you're asking them to take my temperature. So I'm trying to get through security, trying to catch this flight, and if my temperature reads a different way, which may not be accurate, I may have to be set off to the side and delayed for my flight. Not only that, when you talk about TSA, again, you don't want to neglect the security measures at the airport, and especially over at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. You guys have no clue how many weapons are discovered as people are trying to go through the security checkpoint. And when I worked there, when I did the risk assessment of the airport, it was just mind blowing. Thankfully, they're able to catch all these, weapons and various things like that. So now you want to take an added responsibility, which is a very important responsibility, and say, okay, TSA, I need you guys to do the temperature screening. Not only that, where did you get this training for this temperature screening? And I'm sure we see this a lot. I can't remember. I think I was going to pick up some blades for my clippers, and I was going into one of the beauty stores here in Georgia, and you had the folks doing my temperature check. I didn't want to argue with them, but I was just kind of blown away because, my thought process is, what measures do you have in place? And not only that, what's your background on doing this temperature screening? So you have to keep all that in mind. And I would say, I don't think that should be an added responsibility for the TSA screeners. I think they should just focus on what they've been doing. Hopefully none of you guys on this call had any bad experiences with the TSA, but if you haven't, hopefully they're doing a great job and they're catching what they're supposed to catch, because again, we don't want to have another terrorist attack on our homeland because someone didn't do their job and you had some weapon get through security and now it's on that aircraft.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because typically a fever threshold is any temperature greater than 101.4, but for COVID, it is different, where 100 is the fever. So if you are rushing like I do, going to the airport, that can raise your temperature. So thank you for stressing that. And there've been a lot of questions about aircrafts. What are the risks of getting corona on an aircraft? Are they properly ventilated for coronavirus? Are they recirculating the same air?
Personally, I think you're probably safer on an aircraft than you are sitting in the waiting area. And the reason why I say that, because again, because the aircraft are doing all this special cleaning, you're cleaning behind them. And you also have to keep in mind on an aircraft, it's they're using what's called the HEPA filter. Those HEPA filters, it captures 99% of the microbes on the aircraft. Now, again, it's not 100%, but it's capturing 99% of the particles on that aircraft. So again, just making sure the person in front of you, behind you, on the side of you, if they are going to sneeze, hopefully they're doing it the right way, where they're sneezing into their armor, not just sneezing out, because again, there's that 1% possibility. But again, keep in mind that the any aircraft that you're on, they use what's called the HEPA filters, and you have various numbers. You know, the higher the number, the more particles it can capture, but the higher the number, the harder the airflow is to get through. So just keep that in mind. So again, you know, just sitting around the waiting area, you're around so many different people and you're out in this open area that you don't know what's going on. But when you're on that tube, and that's why, you know, you see the reopening of the airlines flying, but you haven't heard anything about the cruise ships taking off yet, because again, they're probably working around all that. On a cruise ship, you're outside, you're inside. So how do you circulate that air? When I go back into my office building, if I have to go back, you know, if any of us have to go back into the office, at one time you were like, okay, this is great, the building is cool, but now COVID-19, if my office is on the 9th floor and you have a different office company on the 8th floor, what type of HEPA filters are you guys using where this air is being circulated where I don't stand a chance of getting ill because someone on the 8th floor probably didn't do what they were supposed to and it circulated on the 9th floor?
Yeah, that's correct. And like you said, right now the Mayo Clinic is doing a lot of studies or research, I should say, at engaging air decontamination and simulations of viral particles and how they spread and what is needed to actually kill it. So they haven't had a lot of studies out right now on ventilation, but they are working towards that because, like Stacey said, on aircraft, you're more concerned with the people that are you're close to, with, you know, being in the airport itself than you are on the actual airplane. And then, you know, we have to ask those questions as well in other places. You know, what is the ventilation like? Are you in an old building versus a newer building where they probably already have HEPA filtration systems in place? A lot of the LEED certified buildings and things like that already have that, but some of our older facilities do not. And when was the last time, you know, they cleaned or changed out the filters? Was it before we got the notification back in January, or, you know, are they waiting for the next service time? There's a whole lot of questions inside of that you want to be aware of when we talk about ventilation.
Right, and to clarify for the audience, HEPA stands for high energy, high efficiency particulate air filter. Right. And not only does it filter out a lot of the germs, the viruses and bacteria, but also that particulate matter, you know, because this coronavirus, not only does it travel inside of respiratory droplets, but it also travels on top of particulate matter, air pollution. So thank you for stressing that. I have a HEPA filter in my room right now, recommended for all homes.
Get them for your vacuum cleaners or anything like that.
Yeah. Right. And just so we don't forget another question that was in the chat, Ms. Dawkins, you mentioned hotels and the guidelines and protocols, and also what about extended stay hotels? What if you're there for about 1 to 2 months? Do your guidelines and protocols change for them?
Well, what's going on with the hotels now is that even with, well, of course, with extended stays, you do your own cleaning anyway, but in the traditional hotels, I was there for a week and they let us know right up front that they weren't coming in anyway. I usually put my sign out, if I'm staying for a week, I'm not letting you in anyway. I'm going to do my own cleaning because I kind of know what I'm doing. But for extended stay, you know, once again, you want to ask about the filters in the air conditioning unit in your room. And then you want to have your own protocol set, you know, as to how you're going to clean and maintain your room. So I'm not sure if that answers that person's question, but there's a lot of people. I have a friend that was staying in an down in Florida. So, you know, she just did her own cleaning.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do recall staying at a hotel one time and I always look at the air filters, and and this one looked like carpet.
Right. So that's really where your concern would be. You want to make sure that they have cleaned that out. When was the last time they cleaned it out? And, you know, you want to be looking at a clean system, because that really right there can cause some problems.
Now, one thing I will say, if you have to travel for business and you're staying at a hotel or extended stay, a lot of times companies will have contract with hotels. And I know the airline industry, they'll have contracts with hotels, and they may, you know, block off certain rooms on the 2nd or 3rd floor. So when if I travel and I stayed in room 10, they may give me that same room again because they have my information. So you want to ensure, you know, you're getting the proper cleaning done to that room. So it's a possibility that if you travel quite a bit for business, that you may be booked into the same hotel room.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much what we're saying is that travel is changing and we have to just be ready to adapt to the changes. Rest areas, you know, at the very beginning, many of them were closed. I read where many of them were suffering from lack of toilet paper like the rest of the world because, you know, normally in places like that, they have lots of toilet paper where apparently people were taking them. So, you know, you have to just, once again, plan your trips, strategically plan your trips, and understand that the places that we commonly go to may not all necessarily be open as we're traveling. So what is your plan B? And I have to think back when I was in college and visiting my roommate's grandmother, and she told us that she didn't want us stopping on the way back to our dormitory, and she was giving us a slop jar. I had never heard that term before, but that just grossed me out. So I just had that flashback right there. And so some of you may know what that is, that slop jar, but that was not something I was going to utilize. That was just really funny.
Okay, just to make sure we're answering Calvin's question.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead,
So is the risk lower if you're staying at a, just to make sure we're answering Calvin's question, is your risk lower if you're staying at an extended stay hotel for about 1 to 2 months? What about the risk level? Is it?
I wouldn't say that. I would say it's about equal. It's the same because, you know, you still have people in and out of those facilities as well. It's not like for extended stay, it's not like everybody's there for that amount of time. You may just be that person that's there for 2 to 3 months, but those other individuals, a lot of times I know when I've stayed in extended stays out in Florida, because I was there for like a week or two, there were utility companies, utility workers that were there, and they may have been there, you know, for a week and then they're transferring out. When I was in Savannah, as I was getting ready to go, even though I had been there for a week, I was next to the military base and there were a group of those guys coming in. So, you know, there's still a lot of movement. And so I think when you talk about risk levels and this is only my, you know, my opinion, I think it's probably about the same, you know, unless they can declutter those common areas and get people not to be, you know, all around the cafeteria, the dining areas and things like that, then, you know, your risk may be a little different. In extended stays, they don't have those because you have kitchenettes and kitchen areas. So that may have served as some reduction, but I think it's probably about the same because you have different people that are coming in and out of those facilities. So I hope that answered your question, Calvin. So just remember, there's no vaccination, there's no medication right now. This is Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett from the National Institute of Health, and she's one of the lead scientists for the coronavirus vaccine research right now. And you know, her team is constantly working and updating information as to what they're doing. Understand that, you know, there's no quick fix to this. They still have 3 phases to any kind of vaccine trial that is testing it for safety, efficiency, and then they do a large population trial. And even after that, there's no guarantee that those initial vaccine candidates, that it's going to be effective. So, you know, we have to just go through this process, practice the guidelines, build up our immune system, get adequate sleep, adequate rest, you know, reduce our anxiety, all of those other things that we know we should be doing until they're able to come up with a solution to this. And I think it should be a concerted effort with all of us working together.
All right, and now for our last set of questions. Should someone avoid traveling internationally during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Right now, that is something that we have to look at. Again, if you're trying to go to the EU, that's something that we can't do right now. As far as internationally, I don't want to say no that you can't, but you can go to the Caribbean islands. As I mentioned earlier, you know, those of you that wanted to go to the Bahamas last week, you couldn't, but you know, a couple of days later, they lifted that ban. But I will stress again, if you're going to travel internationally, make sure you look at the travel procedures that they have in place. a lot of these Caribbean islands, because, you know, they're confined and they're small, they may have a small case of COVID numbers where, you know, here in the United States, we're looking at our numbers climb. So when you travel to these locations, you may have to quarantine for a certain amount of time, possibly 14 days. You may have to fill out, you know, paperwork. I know with the Bahamas, when they lifted their ban, you have to pay out of your pocket to stay at a government facility and quarantine for 14 days. So now, is it worth me traveling on vacation to the Bahamas? So those are things that you have to think about versus, do I want to just stay in state and travel and go see the mountains in Georgia versus traveling internationally? But very important right now that we are not allowed to travel to the EU. And, you know, that's because of our numbers. And recently over in Spain, I know they had like a big outing there at one of their beaches. So I think over in London, they're probably putting some stipulations in place with people coming into their location from Spain. So again, just because things are lifted doesn't mean our numbers are down, but people aren't, you know, heeding to the advices of the doctors and scientists. So just keep that in mind.
And the world is looking at America right now because they're seeing that we don't have control like some of the other, you know, some of the Caribbean islands and places like that. I've been sitting in on some international webinars, and many of them are looking at the fact that not only that, you know, because we are refusing to wear masks, you know, and so, you know, I hear it all the time that when Americans go to other places, we're very arrogant. So if we're not going to wear a mask over here, what makes them think that we're going to wear a mask over there? So I think that the fact that they still have some guidelines or they're banning Americans from coming over there, I mean, I don't blame, you know, I don't blame them, to be honest. But also understanding that, you know, we have an obligation, and many of them are recommending that their people not come here because of what they're seeing in terms of our healthcare systems. Our healthcare systems, we thought, you know, the world thought that we had some of the top healthcare systems, but they're seeing so many of the disparities, and especially when it comes to people who are not from this country. So, you know, we got a whole lot of cleaning up that we need to do before I think we start trying to visit other people's homelands.
Okay, and what about people from other countries coming to America? Have we, in America, have we banned other countries from visiting us?
Well, I know that's definitely a different topic that we can go on and on about that, because, you know, I don't get into the politics of it. I'm sure we've been watching the news, but you have to keep in mind, I know right now out in San Francisco, and I want to say Los Angeles, I may be off on the airports, they are traveling over to China. Now, I can't remember which country in China, but they are traveling over there to the various locations. I want to say Delta, I believe, is one of the airlines that will fly over to China. So if they're flying over there from San Francisco, you know, most likely they're flying here. But you have to keep in mind, you know, you have to factor in what type of documentations will I have to fill out. Is it a need for me to come over to the United States? You know, do I have a family member that's here living and maybe ill? How do I get to them? So those are some of the things that they probably factor in when traveling into the United States.
All right. Well, you've already mentioned the personal sanitizing kit. Is there anything else that we can do to prevent spreading illness when we travel?
The biggest thing is just continuously washing of the hands, you know, using hand sanitizer. But again, you know, our future trips should not only prioritize our own safety, but it should be also the safety of others. You know, during our travel journeys, we come in contact with so many people from the TSA. When you get to your destination, will you have to hop inside a taxi or Uber to get to your location? When you get to your location, will you have contact with the front desk personnel at the hotel? So again, just ensuring that you're properly washing your hands and doing your part, wearing your mask. You know, that right there should hopefully cut down on possibly catching anything.
All right. And can you talk to us about travel insurance? Does it cover international healthcare treatment, emergency, evacuation, or any of these quarantine measures?
This is so important right now. You know, if you don't do anything else, it's definitely important for you to make sure you read the fine print. You know, you want to read that policy as best you can to ensure, you know, will I be covered? As far as the health concerns are concerned with traveling, as Michelle mentioned earlier, you know, you want to be mindful of doing your part, because I don't know if I travel to, you know, another country, what their protocols are in place. If they have to all of a sudden quarantine everybody, you know, how will I be able to get out of that and get back to the United States? So I always tell people, when you travel out of the country, make sure you know where the nearest embassy or the consulate is, because that's going to be your communication line if for some reason you have to quarantine in another country. Quick story, I know we're running short on time, but when I was with the feds, one of my guys had his appendix burst. He was over in Brussels. He did not want to go to the hospital there. He wanted to, you know, toughen it up and fly back to the United States. Now, from Brussels to here, Atlanta, you're probably looking at 9+ hour flight. We could not allow that individual to fly back. He had the worst experience over in Brussels because his insurance for the United States didn't, you know, match up like it did over in Brussels. So what we did, or what I did as a supervisor, first, of course, I contacted his spouse, and the government, we did whatever we could. We got her a passport situated, we got her an airline ticket, and she flew over there to be with her husband so he can have the surgery over in Brussels. And he was over there for a little over a week. I want to say 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, before we allow him to fly back here in the United States. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you read the fine print. Make sure you know where the nearest embassy or the consulate is. If for some reason that country has to go into quarantine and you need to get out, those are some of the things you want to keep in mind. That's why I stress enough, you know, always keep a copy of my passport, because you never know when you're scrambling, trying to get out of stuff and going, you know, just know your exit routes, know the exits of the hotel. I'm speaking on the security side of it, not the safety side, but that's, those are some of the things I would recommend with that.
And of course, on the safety side, I tell people that all the time. First thing I do when I get into a hotel, mainly because some of my mentors are retired firefighters, is I walk the escape route. I want to find out, you know, exit according to OSHA is to, through, and away. If I can't get to it, through it, and away, it's not an exit. So I want to make sure that I'm able to exit that building. I know where all the fire extinguishers are. I know exactly how far that is to my my hotel room. And I have been evacuated from 2 hotels in my experience in traveling over these last 20, 25 years. I've had to evacuate a hotel twice. I make sure that I'm not over, you know, I don't go above a certain level, because the average fire ladder can only reach to the 10th floor. So I'm really paying attention to stuff like that, but that's primarily because of what I do for a living.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you mentioned earlier, Mr. Porter, about being aware of the U.S. Embassy when you travel, even regardless of the COVID pandemic. Whenever you travel internationally, I found that to be very helpful. Where our U.S. Embassy is. I think you've already covered the U.S. traveling, Americans traveling to Europe.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add to that, or should we just talk about the will prohibiting U.S. travelers have significant consequences for the EU?
Not just the EU. That's a great question. You also have to look at your Caribbean islands. If you're going to ban the U.S. travelers for coming to these locations, a lot of these countries are dependent on our dollars, and especially during this time right now, which are the summer months. This is the time when we would all travel, you know, to the European Union for vacation. And there's so much money involved in tourism where it's helping out that country. So again, once the borders open back up for the U.S., will we have a great relationship with them, or will that relationship be soured? So you have to keep that in mind, that, you know, our dollar goes a long way in some of these countries, and it helps them out with their tourism.
So one last thing that I wanted to say, that we want to make sure that people understand that travel is not just limited to vacations, transportation, not just to cruise ships and airplanes, there's buses. So as our children prepare to go back to school, how will they disinfect the school buses? How frequently will they be disinfecting them? Who's providing the service? What does that look like in inclement weather, in cold weather? You know, those are some questions that I would ask parents as they prepare their kids to go back to school. Also for college students, returning or checking back into dormitories, what does that process look like? What about common spaces, those shared bathrooms, cafeteria, dining areas? all of that. Those are some questions when we talk about travel or we talk about lodging. We have to understand that we now have kids that are going back to school in shared spaces. As Stacey mentioned earlier, they're under one roof. What does that look like? Are you asking the pertinent questions as your child prepares to go back to school? We want to make sure that you understand that, you know, we're not just focused on the traveling, like, you know, our typical vacations and all of that stuff, but our children will be traveling across our city streets that, you know, back to their schools, and our some of our other children will be traveling to get back to college or starting college. And we want to have that information. What happens if your child gets sick? You know, do you have a medical plan that can be utilized in the state that that college student is going to? So that opens up a whole nother avenue of questions that we need to be looking at as we prepare for that. And then on top of that, we're now starting, I've been, and I have to give mention, most of my training modules came out of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, where I'm doing training with the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And one of the things that we're starting now is we're starting to look at we're starting to do disaster preparedness training, because we have to ask ourselves the question, what does that look like now on top of COVID-19? When we have these, you know, more than one situations that can really, really wreak havoc during this time. What does that look like? And what does that look like for our children who are away in school? So you want to start coming up with your own strategic plan. You need to have your own health and safety protocol, your own personal family health and safety protocol, just like businesses have. Stacey, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't have anything to add. I just want to thank everyone. I know some folks had to time out to attend to other meetings, but I just want to thank everyone for you know, attending this webinar. It's a lot of information. I think we have more, but you know, again, we're pressed for time, and there may be other questions that Dr. White has. But you know, if you go to the next slide, we have some resources, available resources that you can go to and look up information. And Dr. White, I didn't know if you wanted to do this. I apologize if I'm stealing your thunder.
Oh, no, this is your presentation.
Okay, and these are resources. Again, this is recorded, so you will have this information if you're not able to take a screenshot. So, you know, I wouldn't worry about this, but great information. You can do your research on this. And again, you know, thank you guys very much. If you have any questions, I think the next slide has our information, Michelle. Okay, this is my information along with Michelle Dawkins. Thank you guys very much. Once again, if you have any information, this is my cell phone number. You can reach me there, or you can also reach me via email. And feel free, if you have any questions about reopening your business and what procedures should you have in place or anything like that, just feel free to reach out to me.
And same thing here, if you need help with getting any of your documentation together, coming up with a safety plan for whether it's your business or your home, you know, I would be more than willing to assist you in that. Thank you so much. Thank you to our executive director of the Atlanta Black Chambers, who is I see he's on the line here, as well as our president of the Atlanta Black Chamber. So if either of you have something that you want to say, Melvin.
I just want to thank everyone for turning out for this. Obviously, this is a very important activity because the information it can be life-saving, if not us, our loved ones. Big shout out to the Education and Workforce Development Committee, the chair, Ms. Michelle Dawkins, who's been dedicated to making this committee as relevant as the other committees and groups within the chamber. And she's got her, I'll say, she's got her right-hand man now, Mr. Stacey Porter, who came on board recently as a member of the Atlanta Black Chambers. And the future is very bright for the Education and Workforce Development Committee. So I want to thank both of you. Great job. This was awesome. And as Stacey said, it is recorded. So we're going to make it available because we want the whole community to benefit from your knowledge and your expertise. Thank you.
Yes, and I also want to give a special thank you to you, Mr. Coleman, for your continuous support of the Community Affairs and the Health Committee. We really do appreciate it. And I also want to thank Georgia Power once again for being our sponsor.
And Dr. Yolanda White, excellent job as the host and facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you.